Rumpole and the Stuttering Typewriter. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Old Bailey Stories. If you have stumbled into these hallowed precincts by accident, do not be alarmed. Accidents are how most people encounter the law, whether it is the law of burglary, the law of libel, or the law laid down at Froxbury Mansions by she who must be obeyed. So, before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you like what I am doing here. Tell us where you are and what time it is in the comments. I always find it reassuring to know that, while I am condemned to the Central Criminal Court, somebody else is enjoying freedom in a place where the tea is hot and the judges are imaginary. I should warn you, though, that tonight's tale involves that most modern of weapons. Not the revolver, not the kosh, not even a well-aimed umbrella in a bus queue. I mean the typewriter, a machine built to make words behave, yet forever inclined to betray its owner with a smudge, a slip, or a stubborn key which refuses to do its duty at the crucial moment. In my experience, the criminal mind is rarely a genius. It is more often a man who has borrowed a suit, invented a conscience, and forgotten that paper keeps its own sort of memory. The police, for their part, are fond of tidy explanations. They like their villains obvious, their evidence labelled, and their conclusions typed in capitals. Now switch off the lights, pour a modest glass of Chateau Thames Embankment, and let us see what the Old Bailey has to say tonight. Chapter 1. The Brief with Carbon Copies. I was in the very act of administering first aid to my spirit with a glass of Pomeroy's claret when Henry appeared at my elbow. Henry, my clerk, can creep into a room with the silence of a confession and the same effect on one's digestion. He wore the expression of a man who has mislaid something priceless and expects at any moment to be sentenced by she who must be obeyed. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, in a tone which suggested that the flying squad were crouched behind the optic stand. It is a blackmail." "The word," I observed, "has a vulgar ring, Henry, like linoleum. Who is being blackmailed, and by whom? And can it possibly be finished in time for me to get home and be criticized over supper?" Henry produced a file, the sort of file which has already absorbed despair from every hand that has touched it. He placed it before me as though it might go off. "It is at the Old Bailey," he whispered. "A typist, Mr. Rumpole. Miss Doris Phipps, 50 years old. Bonnie Bernard rang. He says it is urgent." There are those who imagine that typists are born in grey offices, like mushrooms in damp basements. They picture them as women who do not laugh, do not sin, and do not do anything worse than mislay a carbon paper. Such people have usually never met a typist in trouble. I took a pull of claret and allowed myself the small pleasure of disliking the case on first acquaintance. Blackmail is one of those offences which makes even the innocent sound guilty, and the guilty sound as though they are merely asking for a loan. Under the Theft Act, 1968, it sits there like a scowling aunt, ready to insist that everyone ought to have behaved better. "Who is the victim?" I asked. Henry consulted his notes, which were written in a hand that looked as though the letters themselves were nervous. "A television person, Mr. Rumpole, not one of the famous ones. A minor personality. A man who appears on the morning program and tells the nation how to fry an egg." "So," I said, "we are dealing with a man whose reputation consists of cholesterol and a smile, and Miss Phipps is accused of threatening him with exposure unless he pays her money. How much money do we require for the preservation of scrambled eggs?" £2,000, Henry said, with reverence, as though he had never seen so much in one place. I leaned back and glanced around Pomeroy's wine bar. The familiar gloom, the murmur of Fleet Street men who had once lived on deadlines and now lived on nostalgia, the smell of old wood and older arguments. A place where truth is usually watered down, but never entirely denied. "And what is the evidence?" I asked. "Please tell me the Crown have something more solid than a sense of outrage." Henry's mouth tightened. That meant there was not. "Typed letters, Mr. Rumpole. Signed, a friend." At the word typed, I felt a faint sympathy. A typed letter can look so certain. It stands there in rows, neat as soldiers. Yet it is a flimsy sort of certainty. One ribbon, one pair of hands, one stuck key, one little imperfection that speaks louder than any witness. "I suppose Inspector Sneed has already found a typewriter," I said. "They always do. If there is a fishy smell, they will discover a fish." Henry nodded. "At her office, Mr. Rumpole. They say it matches." "Matches," I repeated. "Like a pair of socks found in the wrong drawer. Take me to Chambers, Henry. If I stay here, I shall become too charitable, and charity is no use in the Old Bailey." At 3 Equity Court, Lincoln's Inn, the corridors had their usual aroma of paper, ink, and ambition. Claude Erskine-Brown was hovering outside his room, dressed as though he expected an invitation to dine with royalty, and likely to be accepted. "Rumpole!" he cried. "I hear you have a blackmail." "The rumour," I said, "travels faster than the law, Claude, which is why it is so often wrong." Claude shook his head with theatrical sorrow. "It is a nasty business. These cases always leave a stain. If you were sensible, old man, you would advise a plea. Save the court. Save yourself. Save Chambers from being associated with typists and television cooks." "Claude," I replied, "Chambers has been associated with you for years. It has survived." Phillida, the Portia of our set, appeared with a bundle of papers and an expression of brisk sanity. "Horace," she said, "Henry told me. Blackmail is never pleasant, but it is often simple. Find the point where the Crown have assumed instead of proved." "I intend to," I said. "Assumption is the great hobby of the police. It saves them from thinking." Henry led me into my room, where my desk looked as though it had been attacked by a small and persistent bureaucracy. On top of it lay the brief, fat with statements. I opened it and found the letters reproduced in photocopy, the signature jaunty, the tone smug. The threat was the usual sort of thing: pay up or be exposed. The details were coy, as blackmail often is. It relies on the victim supplying his own fear. What caught my eye at once was not the threat. It was the type. If you have spent enough years among solicitors, you begin to recognize hands. Not only the hands of men and women, but the hands of machines. Some typewriters stamp the world with their own minor errors: a faint lean to the left, a tired full stop, a cracked letter that looks as though it has been living too hard. I held the copy to the light, as though I could coax it to confess. "Where is Miss Phipps now?" I asked. "At the cells, Mr. Rumpole," Henry said. "The court will sit tomorrow." "So," I said, "we meet our client at the place where innocence waits among the guilty and learns bad habits." On the way to the Old Bailey, I endured the telephone call that always comes, sooner or later, like a summons from domestic life. "She who must be obeyed," I said, as politely as a man may speak when he knows he is already in the wrong. "You are not coming home for supper," Hilda stated. She did not ask. Hilda never asks. She announces. "I am defending an underdog," I said. "A typist." "A typist," she repeated as though I had said a serpent. "How much are you being paid to defend a typist?" "Money," I said, "is a matter of taste. Justice is a matter of principle." "Principle," Hilda replied, "does not pay the electricity, nor does it help Nick find a sensible career. Nick, our son, has spent most of his life avoiding sensible careers, which is perhaps his one inherited talent." "I shall be home when I can," I said. "You will be home," Hilda said. "When I say you will be home." The line went dead, as though the telephone itself had been instructed. At the Old Bailey, the cells have their own atmosphere. Not damp, exactly, but a kind of permanent disappointment. Miss Doris Phipps sat on a bench, hands folded, as though she had been told to wait for a bus that would never come. She was not dramatic. She did not weep. She looked at me with the weary politeness of a woman who has spent years taking dictation from men who think shouting is management. "Mr. Rumpole," she said, "they told me you were coming." "They tell people many things in this building," I said. "Some of them even turn out to be true. Miss Phipps, I am your barrister, and I propose to do something unfashionable. I propose to believe you until the evidence forces me to stop." She swallowed. "I did not write them," she said. "I do type, of course, that is what I do, but I did not write those letters." "Tell me about your office," I said. "Tell me about the typewriter. Tell me who uses it. Tell me who would like you to be blamed." She blinked at that, as though the idea of anybody taking an interest in her life was unfamiliar. "It is an insurance office," she said. Grey. "The typewriter is on a table. Everyone uses it. If the new girl cannot find hers, she uses ours. If the managers want something done quickly, they use ours. If the managing director's nephew is bored, he uses it and makes jokes." "A nephew," I said. "Ah." "He drives a fast car," she added, without malice. "He is always talking about motorbikes." "Motorbikes," I murmured. "A splendid way to turn money into noise." She stared at her hands. "They took my typing," she said, "at the station. They said, 'Type this, Miss Phipps.' They were very polite. They kept looking at me as though I was a surprise. 'Polite policemen,' I said, 'are like polite tax inspectors. They do it for a reason.'" Her voice dropped. "The typewriter," she said, "has a key that sticks. The letter R. It has done for weeks. I told them. They said it did not matter." I felt, at that moment, something close to cheerfulness. The sort of cheerfulness that comes when you see a small crack in a large wall. "No," I said softly. "It always matters." Outside, above us, the Old Bailey clock went on, pretending that time is orderly. I closed the file. "Miss Phipps," I said, "I cannot promise you comfort. I cannot promise you that the judge will be kind. I cannot even promise you that my wife will be sympathetic. But I can promise you this. If your typewriter stutters, I shall make the Crown stutter with it." She looked at me then, and for the first time her eyes showed something like hope. I left the cells and returned to the corridor, where barristers drift like smoke, and where reputations are made and mislaid. Somewhere up the building, a television cook was no doubt practicing a concerned expression for the witness box. And somewhere, in a grey office, a typewriter sat waiting, its keys innocent, its ribbon guilty of nothing but ink. I began to compose, in my head, a small line of Wordsworth for the occasion. Not because poetry solves cases, but because it reminds one that human beings are more than documents. The law, in the end, is only words. Tonight it was going to depend on a single letter. Chapter 2. The Parade of Typefaces. The following morning I arrived at the Old Bailey with the resigned air of a man going to a family wedding. I wore my wig, my gown, and my expression of injured innocence. All three are useful in court. The lists were pinned up like notices of doom. Miss Doris Phipps appeared in the dock, small and neat, as though she had come to type a letter for the judge. Behind her sat a woman I took to be her sister, clutching a handbag with the determination of someone defending the crown jewels. Claude Erskine Brown floated to his feet when our case was called. He looked freshly laundered by privilege. "My lord," Claude began, "this is an allegation of blackmail. The defendant is charged under the Theft Act 1968. The Crown say she made unwarranted demands with menaces. The victim is a television personality. The defendant, a typist, used her professional skills to threaten exposure unless paid the sum of £2,000. He spoke as though Doris had used a machine gun. The judge peered down at us. He was one of those severe fellows who treat minor crime as if it is a personal insult. His voice had the clipped impatience of a man who has never waited for a bus. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "I assume you will advise your client sensibly." "I am always sensible, my lord," I replied. "It is only my clients who occasionally disappoint me." Claude smiled faintly, as though the law itself had made a small joke. The judge did not smile at all. Bail was refused, of course. In cases like blackmail, the court imagines the accused will flee to South America, even if she has never been further than Croydon. Doris was led away, and I followed Henry and Bonnie Bernard into the corridor. Bonnie Bernard is a solicitor of the old school. By that I mean he has the air of a man who has been shouted at by clients and ignored by barristers for so long that his nerves have retreated into a safe place. "Rumpole," he said, "I am glad you have it. Doris is a good girl. She has worked for that firm for years. Never been in trouble. She would not know how to blackmail a stray cat. The Crown say the letters were typed." I said. Bonnie nodded, with a sigh that could have come from the insurance office itself. "Yes, typed letters, signed a friend. The police are enchanted by the idea. Inspector Sneed in particular. He has got himself a document examiner, a fellow who talks as if he has invented the alphabet." "Has anyone seen the originals?" I asked. Bonnie hesitated. The victim handed them over. "The police will not let us handle them. They say it might contaminate the evidence." "Contaminated with the truth," I murmured. "Tell me about the victim." Bonnie lowered his voice. "Because even in the corridors of the Old Bailey, people are afraid of reputations. His name is Barry Tuck. He does a morning segment, household hints. He smiles a lot. Married. There are rumors." "There are always rumors," I said. "Otherwise nobody would pay." Henry cleared his throat. "Mr. Rumpole, I have spoken to the office, sir. The insurance place. A woman there says the typewriter is used by several people." "That," I said, "is what I should call a start." Before I could proceed to the important work of investigation, I was intercepted by Inspector Sneed himself, as though he had been lying in wait for my moral education. Sneed is one of those policemen who look as though they have been carved out of regulation. His eyes contained the mild contempt of a man who believes that barristers are hired to obscure the obvious. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "I understand you are representing the defendant?" "I am," I said, "and I hope you will not take it personally." Sneed did not smile either. "We have a strong case," he said. "The letters match the typewriter at her office." "Match," I said. "Like fingerprints?" Sneed brightened. He enjoyed the sound of his own methods. "We did a comparison," he said. "Our document man examined the alignment, the spacing, the wear on the letters. Very scientific. We even did what you might call a parade." "A parade?" I asked. Sneed looked pleased. "We typed the same sentence on several office machines," he said. "We placed them in a row. The victim picked the one that matched the blackmail letters." "Your victim," I said, "is able to recognize typewriters at a glance." "It is his letter," Sneed replied. "He knows what he received." I looked at Henry, who was biting the inside of his cheek. "Henry dislikes policemen, not from principle, but from experience." "And what sentence did you type?" I asked. Sneed hesitated, as though he had not expected interest in detail. "Something ordinary," he said. "A standard sentence. Our constable chose it." "A standard sentence chosen by a constable," I said. "It is no wonder England sleeps soundly." Sneed stiffened. "We have her," he said. "A typist. She can type. She had access. She did it. It was so neat that it would have made a filing clerk weep with joy." "You do not mind," I said, "if I look at the typewriter?" "You will not get near it," Sneed replied. "It is evidence." "Inspector," I said, The typewriter is not going to run away. It is not even likely to commit further crime. Let it be examined properly. Sneed's eyes narrowed. He hated proper examination. It suggested his own had been inadequate. "I will see what can be arranged," he said, and marched off with the air of a man who has conceded a great deal when he has conceded nothing at all. By lunchtime I was back at 3 Equity Court with Henry, and with an appointment to visit the insurance office. As I left chambers, my telephone rang. I knew the voice before it spoke. "You are not coming home for lunch," she who must be obeyed announced. "I am in the service of justice," I said. "You are in the service of anything that keeps you from eating properly," Hilda replied. "Nick rang. He says he is considering something in the arts." "That," I said, "is a familiar tragedy." "You will be home this evening," Hilda said. "There is a meeting of the Residents' Association." "Must I attend?" "You must," Hilda replied, "because you are my husband." The line went dead again, as though Hilda had merely flicked me off like ash. The insurance office was in a building that looked as though it had been designed by someone who hated daylight. Inside, the air had that faint tang of paper and fatigue. Desks were arranged in rows. Women typed. Men walked about, holding folders as if they were in charge of civilization. A receptionist led us to a small glass cubicle where the managing director sat like a minor god. He wore a suit which had never known a speck of dust. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, with the tone of a man who has never been accused of anything, "this is a most unfortunate business. Miss Phipps is an excellent employee. We are shocked." "Shock," I said, "is a luxury. Facts are more helpful." He spread his hands. "The police have been here," he said. "They took the typewriter. They interviewed the staff. It is all terribly disruptive." "Who used the machine?" I asked. He frowned, as though the question was improper. "It is a shared typewriter," he said, "for general use. Anyone might have used it, but the police say it matches." "And your nephew?" I asked, as casually as I could. The man stiffened. "My nephew," he repeated. "He is in training. He does not type." At that moment the door swung open without a knock, and a young man strolled in as if the world was his club. He had hair carefully dishevelled, and the bright confidence of someone who expects to be forgiven. "Uncle," he said, "you wanted me." The managing director turned a shade paler. "Not now," he snapped. The young man's gaze fell on me. He smiled, and the smile did not reach his eyes. "Who is this?" he asked. "I am Horace Rumpole," I said. "And you are?" "Derek," he said. "Derek Henshaw." "A pleasure," I said, "though I cannot promise it will remain one." He laughed, as if I had made a joke. "I do not see what this has to do with me," he said. "That," I replied, "is a common problem in criminal courts." He looked at his uncle, then at me. "I have a meeting," he said, and sauntered out. When the door closed, the managing director gave a small sigh of relief, as though a draught had passed. "Your nephew," I said, "is very fond of motorbikes." The man stared at me. "I have no idea," he said quickly. I leaned forward. "Tell me about the typewriter," I said. "Any faults? Any repairs? Any keys that stick?" He blinked. "I do not know," he said. "The girls handle that." "The girls," I repeated. "Then perhaps we should speak to them." We were introduced to the typing pool, where Miss Phipps usually sat. Her desk was tidy. A cup-ring marked the place where her tea had stood. On the blotter was a sheet of paper with a line of practice typing, as if she had been trying to keep her hands steady. A woman named Miss Gribble, who looked as though she had spent her life disapproving quietly, told me what I wanted to know. "The R sticks," she said. "It has for weeks. Sometimes it double strikes." Doris reported it. "They never send anyone." "Who keeps the maintenance log?" I asked. Miss Gribble pointed towards a small room at the back, where a man with oily sleeves was bent over a stapler like a surgeon. "That is Mr. Biddle," she said. He writes everything down. He is very proud of it." Mr. Biddle produced the maintenance book with solemn delight. It was his scripture. He ran a finger down the page. "Typewriter. Typing pool," he read. "Fault reported. Letter R sticking. Several complaints. No action authorized." I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with claret. "May I have a copy?" I asked. Mr. Biddle looked pained, then thrilled by the importance of his own handwriting. "I suppose," he said, "if it is for the Old Bailey." "It is," I said, "and it may save an innocent woman from becoming a cautionary tale." As Henry carefully copied the entries, I looked around the office. It was the sort of place where everyone knows everyone, and no one knows the truth about anyone. A perfect breeding ground for suspicion. On the way out, Miss Gribble stopped me. "There is one thing," she said. "Doris is not liked by everyone." "Why not?" I asked. Miss Gribble hesitated. "She is quiet," she said. "She does her work. She does not gossip. That makes some people feel judged." I nodded. "In England, virtue is always taken as an accusation." Outside, London was wet and impatient. Henry clutched the copied log as though it were a winning lottery ticket. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "this could be important." "It is," I replied. "A typewriter that stutters tells the truth more honestly than most witnesses." As I headed back towards chambers, I could already hear Claude's voice in court, smooth as a silk handkerchief. I could see the judge's impatient frown, and I could see, in the midst of it all, a single letter refusing to behave. If the Crown wanted to convict a woman on the basis of type, then we would make type speak back. And, of course, I still had the Residents' Association to survive. Chapter 3. The Committee of Virtue. If you wish to understand the English criminal justice system, I recommend you attend a meeting of the Residents' Association at Froxbury Mansions. There you will find the same devotion to procedure, the same appetite for punishment, and the same belief that a stern letter will reform the wicked. She who must be obeyed had arranged the chairs in our sitting-room with military care. The neighbours arrived carrying biscuits and grievances. Mr. Gubbins, from the second floor, brought minutes from the last meeting, as though they were sacred texts. Mrs. Wiley, from number 12, came armed with a petition. Even old Major Henshaw appeared, a man who regards every social change since 1945 as a personal offence. I arrived late, as is my custom, and was immediately treated as though I had escaped from custody. "You said you would be home," Hilda announced, loud enough for the stairwell to hear. "I am home," I replied. "In body, if not in spirit." "You smell of claret," she added. "I have been in court," I said. "A place which forces one to seek consolation wherever it can be found." The meeting began with a discussion about rubbish disposal. It lasted long enough for the rubbish to evolve into a new species. The next item concerned the behaviour of a young couple on the 4th floor, who played music with a beat which in Froxbury Mansions is considered a form of violence. Then, at last, we came to crime. "There have been letters," Mrs. Wiley announced. "Threatening letters." The room fell silent, as though the Old Bailey itself had moved in. "Letters," I said. "In Froxbury Mansions we usually express menace by leaving notes on the lift." "These are anonymous," Mrs. Wiley went on. "Typed. It says, 'If we do not stop complaining to the council, certain facts will be revealed about our private lives.'" Major Henshaw gave a snort. "Blackmail," he said. "The country is full of it. Not like in my day. In his day, of course. Blackmail was conducted through gentlemen's clubs, and never admitted." Hilda looked at me as if the entire business had been arranged by my profession. "I suppose you think it is amusing," she said. "I think," I replied, "that typed letters are an invitation to hysteria. One must not confuse paper with authority." That remark did not improve my popularity. Mr. Gubbins glanced at his minutes as if he had found an offence. "I propose," Mrs. Wiley said, that we inform the police. Informing the police, I observed, is like feeding pigeons. Once you start, you never get rid of them. Hilda's eyes narrowed. She does not appreciate my observations when they interfere with community spirit. You will not make jokes, Horace, she said. Some of us are concerned. Then, I said, let us be concerned in an orderly fashion. Do any of these letters contain facts, or are they merely suggestions? Mrs. Wiley flushed. That is not the point, she said. In blackmail, I replied, it is always the point. Hilda ended the discussion by declaring that the Residents' Association would write a stern letter to the council and consider a rota for the bins. In Froxbury Mansions, stern letters are the equivalent of capital punishment. When the neighbours finally departed, leaving biscuit crumbs and virtue behind them, Hilda fixed me with the look which has reduced many a domestic tyrant to silence. You are defending a typist, she said. I am defending an innocent woman, I replied. Typing is merely the method by which she earns her bread. She should have married, Hilda said. Many people marry, I said, and still end up in trouble. Hilda sniffed. You always take up with the down and out, she said. Why can you not defend someone respectable? Respectable people, I replied, rarely need defending. They have committees. That line did not please she who must be obeyed, and I slept badly, dreaming of minutes and menaces. The following morning I went to chambers, where Henry greeted me with the air of a man who has discovered a fresh catastrophe, but is determined to file it properly. Mr. Rumpole, he said, Inspector Sneed has agreed you may look at the typewriter. That, I said, is very generous of him. Perhaps he imagines it will confess. Henry also had a folder from Bonnie Bernard. These are Miss Phipps's typing samples, Henry said, from her office, before the police took her to the station. Henry emphasized before in the way a priest emphasizes sin. I opened the folder and examined the pages. The work was what one expects from a typist. Letters, reports, tables of figures, and there, again and again, the stutter. A faint double strike on the letter R, as if the machine could not decide whether to obey. I felt the case settling into place, like a puzzle that wants to be solved. At the police station, Inspector Sneed met me with a tight smile. We do not usually allow defense counsel to examine exhibits, he said. You do not usually convict people on typefaces either, I replied, but these are modern times. He led me to a room where the typewriter sat on a table, innocent and battered. It was a heavy office machine, the sort that could survive a war. Sneed watched me as if I might steal it and flee. I pressed a key at random. The letter A appeared, sharp and obedient. Do you mind, I asked, if I try the letter R? Sneed frowned. You may type, he said, but do not damage it. I struck the R. It hesitated, then printed an R with a faint echo, a shadow beside it. There, I said. A stutter. Sneed leaned forward. He looked irritated. It is old, he said. Machines do that. Machines, I replied, do only what they are made to do. This one is made to betray whoever uses it. Sneed folded his arms. Our document examiner will explain, he said. Then I look forward to his explanation, I replied. I expect it will be lengthy. As I left, Sneed called after me. You will not get her off with a sticky key, Mr. Rumpole. It will not be the key, I said. It will be the Crown's certainty. From there I went to see the victim, Barry Tuck, at the offices of the morning programme. It was a modern place, all glass and bright surfaces. I felt as though I had walked into the future, and found it overlit. Mr. Tuck received me in a small room with posters of smiling people eating wholesome food. He was in his 40s, neat, with teeth that looked as if they had never known a cigarette. His smile appeared at once, then faltered when he realized I was not a producer. Mr. Rumpole, he said, I am terribly upset by all this. "Upset," I said, "is understandable. But it does not help the jury. Tell me, Mr. Tuck, why did you pay?" He looked away, towards a poster of a frying pan. "I could not risk it," he said. "Risk what?" I asked. He swallowed. "It would have ruined me," he said. "My wife, the program, everything." "So?" I said. "The letters threatened to reveal something true." He sat up sharply. "I did not say that." "No," I replied. "You did not? But you paid, which is the nearest most men get to a confession." He stared at me, and his professional smile returned, thin and desperate. "I was frightened," he said. "They said they would go to the papers." "A friend," I said, "is a curious title for a blackmailer." He hesitated. It sounded like someone who knew me," he said. "Did you suspect Miss Phipps?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "I did not know her," he said. "The police told me she was the typist in the office where the typewriter was." "Ah," I said. "So you identified a typewriter you had never seen, in a parade arranged by the police?" His cheeks reddened. "They were very convincing," he muttered. "That," I thought, "is the trouble with the police. They so often are." Before I left, I asked one more question. "When you withdrew the money," I said, "did the bank do anything unusual?" He blinked. "They asked why," he said. I said it was for security. "Did they record anything?" I asked. He shrugged. "I do not know," he said. "Banks record everything." I walked out into the corridor with Henry, who had been waiting with his notebook and his anxious soul. "Well?" Henry asked. "He is frightened," I said. "And he is hiding something. That is not the same as lying, but it often looks like it in court." As we returned to chambers, I felt the case moving forward. We had a stuttering R, a shared typewriter, a victim who had paid, and a police force determined to keep the story tidy. The trouble with tidy stories is that they rarely match the facts, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Miss Doris Phipps sat in custody, accused of being wicked when she was merely competent. I poured myself a small glass of claret. A barrister must keep his strength up. "Henry," I said, "I want every detail of that payment. Where the notes came from, who handled them, and who in that insurance office could turn £2,000 into a motorbike." Henry looked as though I had asked him to climb the dome of St. Paul's. "Yes, Mr. Rumpole," he said. "And Henry," I added, "keep that maintenance log safe. In this case it may be worth more than the minutes of the Residents' Association." Henry gave a weak smile. "Nothing is worth those, sir," he said. I could not disagree. Chapter 4. The Pawn Ticket. It is a melancholy truth that the law spends most of its time trying to tidy up other people's mess, while the people who made it are already off buying something noisy. In this case, £2,000 had vanished into London like a dropped coin in a gutter, and Inspector Sneed was perfectly content to pretend it had rolled straight into Miss Doris Phipps's handbag. Henry, however, is not content with gutters. He likes his money, his papers, and his anxieties in neat piles. He arrived at chambers with a folder under his arm and an expression that told me he had been speaking to institutions. "The bank, Mr. Rumpole?" he said. "I have been to the bank." "The bank," I replied, "is a place where they will lend you an umbrella in fine weather and take it back in a storm." What did they say? Henry opened the folder as though it might release a draft. "Mr. Barry Tuck withdrew the money and used notes," Henry said. £2,000. The bank clerk said the manager insisted on recording the serial numbers. He said it was for security. For a moment I simply looked at Henry as though he had produced a Shakespearean soliloquy. "Serial numbers," I murmured. "The sort of thing that turns blackmail into arithmetic." Henry nodded, warmed by my approval. "The manager gave me a copy, sir, with a letter." "You persuaded a bank manager to give you a copy?" I said. "Henry, you are either developing charm or blackmailing him yourself?" Henry flushed. "I explained it was for the defense, Mr. Rumpole. I said a woman might be wrongly convicted." "Banks," I said, "have no objection to wrongful convictions. They object to paperwork. You must have made it sound like a form." Henry gave me the list. Rows of numbers, neat as the typewriting in Doris's office. If the notes were found, they could be traced. If they were spent, they might still turn up, like guilty consciences, where nobody expects them. "Now," I said, "we need to find where those notes have gone. They may be in a mattress, a cigar box, or a motorbike." Henry, who has never owned a motorbike and regards them as instruments of moral collapse, looked uneasy. "I also spoke to Bonnie Bernard," he said. "He says there is a young man at the office who has been boasting. Not openly, sir, only in the way young men do, with a sort of shining eye." "The managing director's nephew," I said. "Derek Henshaw." Henry nodded. "He has been seen at a pawnbroker's," Henry said. "In Clerkenwell. One of the typists mentioned it." "A pawnbroker," I repeated. "A cathedral of small desperation. Excellent, Henry. Let us go and pray." Before we left, Phillida appeared at my door. She had the air of a woman who has read the papers and found them wanting. "Horace," she said, "Claude is making noises about your case in the corridor. He thinks you are embarrassing the set again." "Claude," I said, "finds embarrassment where others find air." Phillida handed me a note. "The prosecution's expert report," she said. I persuaded Henry to obtain it. The document examiner claims the letters match the office typewriter. He uses phrases like consistent characteristics and distinctive wear. He sounds like a man describing a rare bird. I read a few lines and felt the familiar itch. "Experts are paid to be certain, and certainty is the enemy of justice." "He will be fun," I said. "Be careful," Phillida replied. "Juries like experts. They believe in science. They also believe in horoscopes." "I shall not attack his science," I said. "I shall attack his eyesight." In Clerkenwell, the pawnbroker's shop sat between a laundrette and a shop selling second-hand furniture of the kind that looks as though it has heard too many arguments. The pawnbroker's window contained watches, rings, and a violin that had clearly given up hope of ever playing again. Inside, a bell tinkled with a tired sound. Behind the counter sat a man with a moustache, like a defensive hedge. "Can I help you?" he asked, with suspicion. "I am a barrister," I said, as if that explained everything. "Mr. Horace Rumpole. I am searching for the truth, which I am told sometimes visits pawnbrokers." He looked at Henry's anxious face and decided we were not likely to steal the premises. "What do you want?" he asked. "A young man," I said. "Derek Henshaw. He has brought you something, perhaps. Not a conscience. Something more valuable." The pawnbroker's eyes narrowed. "I do not discuss my customers," he said. "That is admirable," I replied. "But I am not asking you to discuss them. I am asking you to help avoid a wrongful conviction." He snorted. "In this place," he said, "everybody is wrongfully convicted by somebody." I leaned slightly closer. "If you do not assist," I said, "Inspector Sneed will arrive. He will ask questions loudly. He will examine your books with enthusiasm. He will probably decide you are a criminal on principle." The moustache twitched. The pawnbroker sighed. "Come to the back," he said, "but do not touch anything." In a small office behind the counter, he opened a ledger. Entries marched down the page like prisoners. He ran a finger along. "Deposit," he said. "For a motorbike?" "Yes." "Derek Henshaw. A week ago." Henry's eyes widened. I could almost hear him adding it to his own private list of sins. "How much?" I asked. £200, the pawnbroker said. "He wanted cash. He said he had it." "And did you record anything?" I asked. He looked offended. "I record everything," he said. "I am not an idiot." He pulled out a little envelope, the sort used for holding notes. Inside were numbers written on a slip. "Serial numbers," he said. "I keep them, for my safety." I felt my spirits rise. It is always gratifying when other people practice one's own brand of paranoia. Henry passed me the bank list. I compared. One number, then another, then another. The notes in that envelope were part of Barry Tuck's money. "Thank you," I said softly. "You have just saved Miss Phipps from a great deal of misery." The pawnbroker shrugged. "She should not have come to me," he said. "I do not like courts." "Nor do most criminals," I replied. "That is why they come to you." On the way out, Henry looked as though he might faint with excitement. "Mr. Rumpole," he whispered. "It is him. It must be him." "It is very likely," I said. "But likely is not proof. We must show how the money travelled from the bank to the pawnbroker without passing through Doris's hands." Henry nodded vigorously. "Inspector Sneed will have to take this seriously," he said. "Inspector Sneed," I replied, "will take it personally." Back at the Old Bailey, I requested an interview with Sneed. He arrived in the corridor with the air of a man dragged from his natural habitat. "Well," he said, "I produced the list of serial numbers and the pawnbroker's note." "These," I said, "appear to match the bank's record of the blackmail money." Sneed stared. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" "From a man who keeps better records than the police," I said. Sneed's eyes hardened. "This proves nothing," he said. "Henshaw could have received it from your client." "That," I replied, "is possible, in the way it is possible that you are the Archbishop of Canterbury. But we have a typewriter that stutters in Doris's hands, and letters that do not. We have a shared machine. We have a young man who likes fast transport, and now we have his deposit." Sneed bristled. "You defense counsel always make stories," he said. "No," I replied. "We make the Crown prove theirs." Sneed snatched the papers, as though they might bite him. "We will investigate," he said, grudgingly. "Do," I said. "And while you are at it, locate the rest of the notes. £200 is only the beginning of a motorbike." As he marched away, Henry exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath since breakfast. "That is it, Mr. Rumpole," he said. "It is a fine piece of it," I replied. "But the Old Bailey is full of fine pieces that do not fit until you force them together in front of a jury." I returned to chambers and poured a modest glass of claret. Then, in a gesture of pure courage, I dialed home. Hilda answered at once. "You are late," she said. "I have found a pawn ticket," I replied. There was a pause. "I do not want to know," Hilda said at last. "You will be home for supper." "Yes," I said, "and I shall try not to bring any exhibits." "You will bring nothing," she who must be obeyed replied, "except an appetite." I hung up and raised my glass to the one authority even the law cannot cross-examine. Outside my window, Lincoln's Inn lay grey and steady, and the city went on selling, buying, and hiding things in plain sight. Somewhere a typewriter waited to be blamed. Somewhere a young man waited to be caught. And somewhere a jury waited to be persuaded that a stuttering letter can tell the truth. Chapter 5. The Other Machine. It was at breakfast, with a piece of toast turning cold beside my plate, that I realized how much the English fear a typed letter. She who must be obeyed had placed one on the table between the marmalade and the butter, as though it were a dead mouse brought in by the cat. "It came under the door," Hilda said, "as if we were living in some common lodging-house." I adjusted my spectacles and read. "The Residents' Association, Froxbury Mansions, demanded that all tenants refrain from leaving bicycles in the hallway, refrain from slamming the front door, and refrain from practicing the saxophone after 10 o'clock. It was signed by Mr. Gubbins, and typed with a firmness which suggested that the typewriter had been fed on moral outrage. "Well?" Hilda said. "Well," I replied, "it is a masterpiece of menaces. If I do not stop slamming the door, I may be exposed as a habitual barrister." "Do not be funny," Hilda said. "Somebody has been sending letters, anonymous letters. I told you." "Then," I said, "it seems London is suffering from an epidemic of typing." Hilda watched me butter my toast. "You are going to court again," she said. "I am," I replied. "A woman's liberty is at stake." "And mine," Hilda said, "is at stake every time you miss a meal." I escaped, as always, into the grey air of Lincoln's Inn, where no one cares whether you eat so long as you produce a brief. At 3 Equity Court Henry was waiting, with papers arranged in anxious towers. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "I have news. Inspector Sneed has spoken to Derek Henshaw." "And did the nephew confess, repent, and take up knitting?" I asked. Henry swallowed. "He says he received the money from Miss Phipps," Henry said. "He claims she lent it to him." I stopped. "Miss Phipps," I said. "A 50-year-old typist with a bus pass lent £2,000 to a young man with a motorbike habit." "Yes, Mr. Rumpole," Henry said. "Inspector Sneed says it is a possible explanation." "It is," I said. "In the same way it is possible that the Lord Chancellor sings in the choir." Henry opened another file. "I also located the motorbike dealer," he said. "A shop near Camden. Derek put down a deposit. The man recorded the serial numbers of the notes." "Why?" I asked. Henry looked proud of himself. "He said he had trouble before," Henry replied. "People paying cash, then complaining. He keeps numbers for his own safety." "England," I said, "is kept afloat by small men who do not trust anyone." We went to Camden, where the traffic roared, and the pavements were crowded with people who looked as though they were going somewhere important. The motorbike shop smelled of rubber and bravado. 2 young men stood admiring a machine as if it were a racehorse. A man in a leather jacket came forward, wiping his hands. "You after a bike?" he asked. "I am after a truth," I said, "which is usually harder to start." He stared, then grinned, as though he had heard everything. "Name?" he asked. "Derek Henshaw," I said. His grin thinned. "Oh," he said. "Him. He left a deposit," I said. "Cash." The man reached under the counter and produced a receipt, then a page of scribbled numbers. "He wanted the red one," the dealer said. "Said he needed something with kick, paid a few hundred down, all cash." "Did you keep the notes?" I asked. "No," he said. "I banked them, but I wrote the numbers. I am not a mug." Henry handed me the bank list. I compared. 1 match, then another, neat as a row of guilty teeth. "That will do," I said. The dealer shifted his weight. "Police been by," he said. "Asked questions. I told them. They looked like they did not want to hear it." "I understand," I said. "The police prefer facts that are quiet." As we left, Henry looked both triumphant and worried, which is his natural state. "This is strong, Mr. Rumpole," he said. "It is strong," I replied. "But we must also deal with the typed letters. The Crown will still point at Miss Phipps and say she can type." Henry nodded. "I have been thinking about the letters," he said. "The clean R." "Exactly," I said. "A typewriter does not mend itself out of respect for the Crown." Back at the insurance office, the managing director received me with a strained politeness, as though I were a minor infection. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "this is becoming disruptive. Clients are asking questions." "Then," I replied, "it is time your office answered some." He sat rigidly behind his desk. "We cooperated," he said. "The police took the typewriter. They have their evidence." "They have 1 typewriter," I said. "Is it the only one in this building?" His eyes flickered. It was the sort of flicker that makes a barrister reach for his pen. "We have machines," he said. "Of course. It is an office." "Is there a typewriter in your room?" I asked. He stiffened. "This is irrelevant," he snapped. "The letters match the typing pool machine." "According to an expert," I replied. "Experts are rarely wrong. They are merely overpaid." I stood up. "I require access to every machine," I said. "If you refuse, I will have one produced in court, under summons." The managing director's face tightened, and I saw the truth. Not criminal truth, office truth, the truth of embarrassment. At that moment the door opened, and Derek Henshaw wandered in, as if summoned by the scent of trouble. He wore a smile, and behind it the cold confidence of a man who believes consequences are for other people. "Uncle," he said, "you wanted me?" His uncle's voice was a hiss. "Not now." Derek looked at me and grinned. "Oh," he said, "it is you again." "It is," I replied. "I am like the taxman, but with better literature." Derek strolled closer. "This is all a bit much," he said. "A woman makes a silly mistake, and now everyone's acting like it is Watergate." "A silly mistake," I said, "usually involves an extra letter, not £2,000. He laughed. "You do not know what she is like," he said. "Doris. All prim, all judgment. She hates it when people enjoy themselves." "Does she?" I asked. "Or does she simply do her work?" His grin faltered, then returned. "She lent me money," he said. "She wanted to help. She is not as innocent as she looks." "Did she lend you the notes with their serial numbers recorded at the bank?" I asked. He blinked, just once. That blink was worth more than his smile. "I do not know about serial numbers," he said quickly. "Money is money." "Not in court," I replied. "In court, money is evidence." Derek waved a hand. "This is a waste," he said. "The police have the typewriter. They say it matches. That is that." "The typewriter stutters," I said. "So," Derek replied. "Hit it properly." There it was, said without thought. The sort of remark that slides out when a man has handled the thing himself. "You have used the typing pool machine," I said. He shrugged. "Everyone has," he replied. "If you need something done quick—" "And the typewriter in your uncle's room?" I asked. The managing director shifted, as though I had poked him with my umbrella. Derek's grin thinned again. "That is not for the pool," he said. "That is different." "Different how?" I asked. "It is maintained," he said, then caught himself. I smiled, gently. "So there is another machine," I said. "One that does not stutter. One that produces a clean R." The managing director stood up. "This is outrageous," he said. "Mr. Rumpole, you are accusing my nephew." "I am not accusing anyone," I replied. "I am defending Miss Phipps. The facts will do the accusing." Outside, in the typing pool, Miss Gribble watched me pass with the calm satisfaction of a woman who knows the office lies are finally catching up. Henry followed me into the street. "Mr. Rumpole," he whispered, "did he just admit it?" "He admitted knowledge," I said. "In law, that is often more useful than guilt." Back at Chambers, I dictated a note to Henry. "Apply for a witness summons," I said. "For the managing director, for Mr. Biddle, for the motorbike dealer, for the pawnbroker, and for the director's typewriter. If the court will tolerate a machine in the witness box—" Henry looked alarmed. "A typewriter in court?" he said. "The Old Bailey," I replied, "has heard worse." That evening, at Pomeroy's, I sat with my claret and considered the neatness of the Crown's story. A typist, a typed letter, a demand, a frightened man who cooks eggs on television. It was tidy enough to make Inspector Sneed purr. But the truth is rarely tidy. It comes with smudges, with double strikes, with keys that stick, and with young men who talk too quickly. I raised my glass and murmured a line, half to myself, "The letter killeth." And in this case, the letter R might yet set my client free. Chapter 6. The Expert with Certainty. On the first day of the trial, I put on my wig with the air of a man donning a helmet before battle. Not because I expected violence. At the Old Bailey, violence is mostly verbal, and usually directed at the defence. She, who must be obeyed, watched me from the doorway of the bedroom at Froxbury Mansions, arms folded, her expression suggesting that my profession was a long illness which might yet prove fatal. "You will not forget," Hilda said, "that we have promised Mrs. Wiley we will attend the charity supper next week." "I shall try," I replied, "though next week I may be in custody myself, for contempt of the Residents' Association." Hilda ignored that, as Hilda ignores most things which interfere with her view of the moral universe. "You have your lunch?" she demanded. "I have a sandwich," I said. "You will eat it," she said. "Yes," I replied, "unless the judge sentences me to starvation." Hilda sniffed. "Judges," she said, "should have wives. Then they would learn discipline." I escaped into the street, where London was damp and impatient. By the time I reached the Old Bailey, my sandwich felt like a legal document, heavy, unpromising, and destined to be ignored. In the corridor outside the court, Claude Erskine-Brown was already in full bloom, immaculate and faintly scented, like a man who expects the jury to convict out of gratitude. "Rumpole," he said, "I do hope you are not going to make a spectacle of yourself." "I shall make a spectacle of your case," I replied. "That is the point of cross-examination." Claude smiled indulgently. "It is quite straightforward," he said. "Typed letters, payment. Exhibit A, Exhibit B. Your client is a typist. She typed them. The jury will see." "The jury," I said, "will see what I show them. That is why the Crown is always so nervous of me." Claude moved away with the pained dignity of a man stepping around mud. Henry hovered at my shoulder, clutching our papers as though they were life-preservers. Phillida came up briskly. "Horace," she said, "remember, keep it simple. Let Claude build his tower. Then remove the bricks." "I shall remove the mortar," I said. "Certainty," the usher called the case. We filed in. The judge sat high above us, robed, powdered, and already irritated by the very idea of spending the day among human beings. He peered at me as though I were an unpleasant file. "Mr. Erskine-Brown," he said, "I presume you are ready?" Claude rose. "My lord, yes. The Crown's case is that the defendant, Miss Doris Phipps, made an unwarranted demand with menaces. She threatened to expose the complainant unless paid the sum of £2,000. The threats were conveyed by typed letters. The money was withdrawn and paid. The typing matches the machine at the defendant's office, and she had access to it. It was tidy. Claude loves tidy. He called his first witness. Barry Tuck entered the witness box with the careful smile of a man who has practised looking sincere in front of a camera. Only now the camera was 12 jurors and a judge. Claude guided him gently through his evidence. Barry received letters. Barry was alarmed. Barry withdrew money. Barry paid. Barry went to the police, as soon as he could do so without admitting anything worse than fear. "And did you recognize the manner in which the letters were typed?" Claude asked. "I did," Barry said. "How?" Claude asked, with that silky tone he uses when he wants the jury to feel clever. "The police showed me," Barry said. "Different samples. One looked exactly like the letters." I rose. "My lord," I said, "I should like that procedure described in plain English." The judge's eyebrows lifted, as though plain English were a form of insolence. "Proceed, Mr. Rumpole," he said. I turned to Barry. "Mr. Tuck," I said, "the police typed a sentence on several machines. then asked you to pick which one looked like your blackmail letter. That is right, Barry said. And you had never seen the typewriter in question before? I said. No, he admitted. You are an expert in typefaces, I suggested. No, he said quickly. Of course not. You are, however, an expert in frying an egg, I said. A titter ran through the jury box. The judge did not share the joke. Mr. Rumpole, he said, do not be flippant. My lord, I replied, I am never flippant. I am precise. I returned to Barry. When you withdrew the money, I said, did the bank do anything unusual? They asked questions, Barry said. They recorded the numbers, I think. You think, I repeated. You were paying attention. I was frightened, he said. So frightened, I said, that you paid £2,000 to a person who called themselves a friend. Claude objected. The judge glared. I sat down, having planted what I needed. Barry was frightened. Barry was vague. Barry was not a man who would be relied on to identify a stranger in a fog, let alone a typewriter. Claude called Inspector Sneed next. Sneed entered like a man taking the witness box as his rightful throne. He outlined his investigation with pride. Letters, office. Typewriter, expert. Parade of samples. When I rose to cross-examine, Sneed fixed me with the look reserved for lawyers who insist on having facts. Inspector, I said, how many people use the typing pool machine at the insurance office? Several, he admitted. More than 2, I said. Yes, he said. More than 5, I said. He hesitated. Possibly, he said. So any number of people could have typed the letters, I said. They could have had access, he corrected stubbornly. Access, I replied, is not guilt. If it were, the whole of London would be in the dock for every burglary. Sneed tightened his jaw. We found the typewriter, he said. It matches. Does it? I asked. Stutter? Sneed frowned. What do you mean? He said. The letter R, I said. Does it stick? He hesitated, and I could see him thinking about what he wished he had checked earlier. It is old, he said. It has faults. And Miss Phipps told you about the sticking R, I said. She mentioned it, Sneed admitted. And you considered it irrelevant, I said. It does not alter the match, Sneed said, louder, as though volume creates truth. It alters everything, I replied, and sat down. Claude called his expert. A document examiner, solemn and self-important, who carried his spectacles like a badge. He spoke of alignment, wear, spacing, and characteristics. He said the blackmail letters were produced on the office machine. He said it as though he were announcing the law of gravity. Claude looked delighted. The jury looked impressed. The judge looked relieved to hear a man who sounded confident. Then I rose. Now, I thought, we shall see whether science can type without looking at the keys. The expert peered at me. Yes, he said, with the faint impatience of a man interrupted during worship. You compared the blackmail letters to typing produced on the office machine, I said. Yes, he replied. They are consistent. You examined the office machine itself, I said. Yes, he said. You tested the letter R, I said. He blinked. I examined the typeface, he said. That is not what I asked, I replied. Did you test the letter R? There was a pause. I did not consider it necessary, he said. Yet the letter R on that machine, I said, sticks and double strikes. Claude rose to object. The judge looked irritable. Mr. Rumpole, the judge said, is this leading anywhere? My lord, I replied. It is leading to the letter R. The judge, who has never had to deal with a typewriter in his life, waved me on. I turned back to the expert. If a machine double strikes the letter R, I said, then any document produced on it tends to show a faint echo of that letter. That could occur, he admitted, unwillingly. And Miss Phipps's typing samples, I said, show such an echo. I have not seen her samples, he said. Ah, I said. So you have concluded she typed the letters without examining how she types? He coloured slightly. I concluded the machine produced the letters, he insisted. And the blackmail letters, I said, show a clean R every time. Claude objected again. The judge sighed, as though he wished the whole case could be dealt with by a stern memo. Answer, the judge said. The expert hesitated. If the letter R were struck firmly, he said, it might not double. It might, I agreed. Or the letters might have been typed on another machine. There was a small ripple in the jury. Not certainty now. Possibility. And you did not examine any other machine at that office, I said. No, he admitted. So, I said, your conclusion rests on an assumption that the only machine capable of typing a clean R was the one that stutters. The expert sat there, trapped in his own confidence, and I felt the quiet pleasure that comes when a case begins to breathe. I sat down. Claude looked less comfortable. Inspector Sneed stared at the floor. The judge frowned at his papers, as though the law had become inconveniently complicated. As the court rose for the day, Henry leaned close. Mr. Rumpole, he whispered. That went well. It went truthfully, I replied, which is usually what the Crown calls badly. In the corridor, Claude glided past me without speaking. That, in Claude's language, is an insult of the first order. I went to Pomeroy's, as any sane man would, and took my claret at a small table. I could hear the court in my head. The expert's certainty, the judge's impatience, the jury's first flicker of doubt. Wordsworth came, as he often does, to my rescue. We murder to dissect, and tomorrow, with luck, I would dissect Claude's tidy story until it lay in pieces on the courtroom floor, and Miss Doris Phipps could return to her bus seat and her cup of tea. For the moment I drank, and allowed myself a rare and modest optimism. The typewriter had begun to speak. Chapter 7. The Serial Number Sermon. The next morning the Old Bailey smelt of wet coats and old arguments. In the corridor outside the court, Henry hovered beside me, clutching our bundle as though it were a newborn. Mr. Rumpole, he whispered, Inspector Sneed is in a mood. Inspector Sneed, I said, is always in a mood. It is his natural habitat. Claude Erskine-Brown passed with a nod that was not quite a nod. He looked as though he had slept badly, which, in Claude's case, is the equivalent of an earthquake. In court the judge peered down at us, already irritated. Mr. Erskine-Brown, he said, are you calling further evidence? Claude rose. My lord, yes. I propose to call the investigating officer again, briefly, to deal with one matter raised yesterday. Claude's voice was smooth, too smooth. When the Crown becomes smooth, it is usually trying to polish over a crack. Inspector Sneed returned to the witness box with a look of injured professionalism. Claude led him, gently, towards a statement. Inspector, Claude said, you have heard suggestions about the letter R. Yes, Sneed replied, as if the letter had insulted him. And you have now satisfied yourself that the blackmail letters were typed on the office machine. Sneed hesitated. There was the smallest pause, the sort that makes a barrister's ears prick up. We still believe that, he said. Claude pressed on. You interviewed Mr. Derek Henshaw, he said. Yes, Sneed replied, relieved to be on familiar ground, and he explained how he came to have cash. He did, Sneed said. What explanation did he give? Sneed cleared his throat. He said the defendant lent him money, Sneed replied. Claude turned towards the jury with the expression of a man presenting a neat parcel. There, my lord, he said. A simple answer. I rose. "My lord," I said, "may I ask the inspector some questions about simplicity?" The judge sighed. "Briefly, Mr. Rumpole." I turned to Sneed. "Inspector," I said, "did you check whether Miss Phipps had £2,000 to lend?" Sneed looked annoyed. "We asked her," he said. "You asked," I repeated. "And you believe the man with the motorbike habit?" Claude objected. The judge frowned at me. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "do not make speeches." "My lord," I said, "I am not making a speech. I am measuring the inspector's standards." I continued. "Inspector, did you obtain bank records from Miss Phipps?" "No," he admitted. "Did you check her wages?" "No," he admitted again. "So you have no evidence she could lend £2,000, I said. Sneed stiffened. "It is possible," he insisted. "In your view," I said, "anything is possible so long as it does not inconvenience the investigation." I let that sit, then moved to the matter Claude wished to tidy away. "You were told the typing pool machine has a sticking R," I said. "Yes," Sneed replied grudgingly. "You examined it," I said. "Yes," he said, "and it stutters." I said. "It has faults," he replied. "Yet the blackmail letters show a clean R," I said. Sneed glowered. "Our expert says it can happen," he said. "Your expert did not test the key," I said. "You heard that yesterday." Sneed's jaw tightened. It was not his favorite day. I sat down. Claude sat down. The judge stared at his papers as though they had become unreliable. The court adjourned for a short time. In the corridor, Henry leaned close. "Mr. Rumpole," he whispered, "the bank manager is here." "Excellent," I said. "The Crown have brought us a man who believes in numbers. Numbers are less inclined to lie." When we returned, it was my turn. I rose. "My lord," I said, "I propose to call a witness from the complainant's bank." The judge looked doubtful. "I hope this is relevant, Mr. Rumpole." "My lord," I replied, "it is money. The Old Bailey is never uninterested in money." A bank manager entered the witness box with the steady gaze of a man who has seen every form of human hope turn into paperwork. He gave his name and swore the oath as though it were another procedure. "Mr. Manager," I said, "did Mr. Barry Tuck withdraw the sum of £2,000 from your branch?" "He did," the manager replied. "In cash?" I said. "In used notes," he confirmed. "And did your bank record the serial numbers?" "Yes," he said. "As a precaution." "A precaution against what?" I asked. "Against disputes," he replied. "People forget what they have done with cash." "Some people," I said, "spend it, others lose it, and others still buy motorbikes." Claude rose to object. The judge waved him down with impatience, which was a small personal victory. "Mr. Manager," I said, "are these the numbers you recorded?" I handed up the list. The manager examined it. "Yes," he said, "that is our record." "Now," I said, "I want you to look at these numbers." I handed up the pawnbroker's slip, and then the motorbike dealer's page, each with its own anxious handwriting. The bank manager compared them carefully. "I see several matches," he said. "Several," I repeated. "How many?" He counted, methodically. "3 on this list," he said, indicating the pawnbrokers, "and 4 on the other." A rustle ran through the jury. The judge leaned forward slightly, as though he had been promised a more interesting day. "Thank you," I said. "Now, my lord, I propose to call the pawnbroker." Claude looked as though he had swallowed his own tie. The pawnbroker entered, moustache bristling, and gave his evidence with the resigned frankness of a man who believes truth is bad for business. "Yes," he said. "Derek Henshaw gave me a cash deposit. I recorded the numbers. And these are the numbers," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And you later learned they match the bank's record," I said. He shrugged. "I do not like police," he said, "but I like being blamed even less." The motorbike dealer was next. He was bolder, as men selling speed often are. "Yes," he said. "Henshaw paid a deposit. Cash. I kept the serial numbers." "And you banked the notes," I said. "I did," he replied. "So these notes were not in Miss Phipps's hands," I said. "No," he replied. "They were in his." When I sat down, the courtroom felt different. Claude's tidy story had begun to sag. The judge glanced at Claude. "Mr. Erskine Brown," he said, "does the Crown wish to ask questions?" Claude stood slowly, as though his own legs had betrayed him. He asked a few questions about procedure, about dates, about whether the pawnbroker and the dealer could be mistaken. Both men, who make their living by mistrust, were firm. Claude sat down again. His face had the strained calm of a man trying not to look down. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "is that the end of your evidence?" "Not quite, my lord," I replied. "I have one more small matter. The other machine." There was a pause. Even the usher looked attentive. "I called Mr. Biddle, the office maintenance man." Mr. Biddle entered the witness box as if he were attending a church service. He carried the maintenance log like a sacred book. "Mr. Biddle," I said, "you keep records." "Yes," he said proudly. "And in those records, is there an entry about the typing pool machine?" "Yes," he replied. "The letter R sticks. And is there any record of a separate typewriter in the managing director's room?" Mr. Biddle blinked, then nodded. "Yes," he said, "there is one. It is maintained. Regular servicing. So it does not stutter," I said. "No," he admitted. "It does not." "And could it produce a clean R?" I said. "It would," he replied, as if the idea were obvious. I let the silence fall. It was a useful silence. It allowed the jury to imagine the neat letters typed after hours in a private office on a machine that behaved. When I sat down, Henry's face was pale with excitement. Claude rose, but his questions were feeble. He did not want another machine in the story. Another machine made it messy. The judge adjourned the case for the day. As we gathered our papers, Claude brushed past me and muttered something about irresponsible fishing expeditions. I smiled sweetly. "It is not fishing, Claude," I said. "It is catching." At Pomeroy's, later, I sat with my claret and considered the joy of evidence, not the evidence of experts waving their certainty like a certificate, not the evidence of policemen who dislike complication, but the evidence of small facts, a sticking key, a list of numbers, a man who keeps a log because he likes order. I murmured a line of poetry, because even the law needs comfort. And then I thought of Miss Doris Phipps, sitting in the dock while men argued about machines. Tomorrow would be the day to make the Crown explain why a typist with a stuttering R would suddenly write clean letters, while money with recorded numbers travelled neatly into the pocket of a young man with fast tastes and slow honesty. Tomorrow, in other words, would be the day for cross-examination. Chapter 8. The Nephew's Alibi. The following morning I entered court with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has placed a banana skin in the path of certainty. Claude Erskine Brown was already at his table, arranging his papers as if neatness could restore his case. Miss Doris Phipps sat in the dock, hands folded, as though she were waiting to be told what to type. She caught my eye and offered a small, timid smile. It was the sort of smile that says, "I am trying to be brave, but I do not know how." The judge looked down at us with the weary patience of a man forced to listen to the same quarrel in different wigs. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "I take it you are about to call Mr. Henshaw." "I am, my lord," I replied. "The nephew, not the major." The judge's mouth tightened. He had no affection for jokes, particularly mine. Henry, seated behind me, looked as though he might faint. Henry always dislikes the moment when a case stops being paper and becomes people. I rose. "My lord," I said, "I call Mr. Derek Henshaw." Derek entered the witness box with the relaxed confidence of a man who believes the world is run for his convenience. He was dressed carefully. His hair was still artfully untidy. He took the oath with the bored air of a schoolboy reciting a rule he does not intend to follow. Claude watched him with a guarded expression. Claude likes witnesses who are obedient. Derek did not strike me as obedient. He struck me as dangerous, which is far more interesting. I began gently. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "you work at the insurance office." "I am in training," he replied. "In training," I repeated. "Training to become what?" "A manager," he said with a slight emphasis. It was the emphasis of entitlement. "You have access to the typing pool," I said. "Everyone has," he replied. "You have used the typing pool typewriter?" I said. "Yes," he said, "when I needed to." "When you needed to," I repeated. "Such as when you needed money." Claude rose. "My lord, this is argumentative." The judge looked irritated. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "ask questions." "My lord," I replied, "I am asking them. It is the answers that keep wandering." I continued. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "did you pay a deposit at a motorbike shop in Camden?" He blinked once. "Yes," he said. "In cash?" I said. "Yes," he repeated. "And did you also pay a deposit at a pawnbroker?" He shrugged. "Yes," he said. "So you had cash?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "Where did that cash come from?" I asked. He smiled, faintly. "From Miss Phipps," he said. "She lent it to me." "Why would she lend you money?" I asked. He spread his hands. "She liked me," he said. I asked. She said yes. "You are saying," I said, "that a quiet typist lent a large sum to a young man who wants a fast motorbike." "It happens," he said. "It may," I replied. "Now let us see if it happened here." I picked up the list of serial numbers. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "are you familiar with banknotes?" He looked puzzled. "Everyone is," he said. "These," I said, "are serial numbers of the notes withdrawn by Mr. Barry Tuck." Derek's smile faltered, then returned. "I do not know anything about serial numbers," he said. "Yet," I said, "the pawnbroker recorded the numbers of the notes you gave him." "That is his business," Derek replied. "And the motorbike dealer recorded them too," I said. He shifted. "They record things," he said, "to protect themselves." "Indeed," I said. "Now the numbers they recorded match the bank's list." Claude rose again. "My lord, the witness cannot be expected to know what matches what." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "what is the point?" "My lord," I replied, "the point is that the money Mr. Henshaw spent can be traced to the complainant's withdrawal." The judge nodded once. "Proceed," he said. I turned back to Derek. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "if Miss Phipps lent you money, why would it be the complainant's money?" His mouth opened, then closed. "I do not know," he said at last. "Maybe she got it from him." "From him?" I repeated. "From a man she has never met." He shrugged with practiced insolence. "People do things," he said. "People do," I replied. "But courts require a little more than people do things." I moved to the letters. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "you know why Mr. Barry Tuck paid?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "He was scared," Derek said. "Scared of what?" I asked. Claude snapped to his feet. "My lord, this is improper. The complainant's private life is irrelevant." The judge looked at me with the expression of a man wondering whether to stop the train. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, "do not turn this into a scandal." "My lord," I replied, "I have no interest in scandal. I have interest in motive." The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful," he said. I kept my tone mild. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "did you know Mr. Tuck?" Derek hesitated. That hesitation was tiny, but it was there. "I have seen him on television," he said. "Did you ever meet him?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. "Did you ever speak to him?" I asked. "No," he repeated. "Did you ever go near the television offices?" I asked. He gave a short laugh. "Why would I?" he said. "I do not care about that rubbish." "You do care," I said. "About money." Claude objected again. The judge sighed and waved me on, as though he had decided to allow me a certain amount of nuisance in exchange for getting the case finished. I changed direction. "It is sometimes wiser to let a witness run into the fence without warning. Mr. Henshaw," I said, "there is a typewriter in your uncle's office." Derek's shoulders stiffened. "Yes," he said. "It is maintained," I said. "I suppose," he replied. "It produces a clean letter R," I said. "I do not know," he snapped. "You told me to hit the typing pool machine properly," I said. "You have opinions about typewriters." His face reddened slightly. "I was joking," he said. "Were you?" I asked. He looked at the jury, trying to charm them. His smile was not as effective without a camera. "You barristers," he said, "make everything dramatic." "I do," I replied, "because your evidence is so dull." A ripple of laughter came from the public benches. The judge glared, but he did not stop it. Judges, like juries, enjoy a little comedy so long as it does not involve them. I leaned slightly forward. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "did you ever use the typewriter in your uncle's office?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "Never," I said. "No," he repeated, louder. "Your uncle's office is private," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And the door can be locked," I said. He shrugged. "Probably," he said. "And you have a key," I said. He stared at me. "No," he said. "Mr. Biddle keeps records," I said. "He records who asks for keys. He records who borrows them." Derek's confidence wavered. It was like watching a motorbike lose traction on wet leaves. "I do not know about records," he muttered. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "the blackmail letters show a clean R. The typing pool machine stutters. The managing director's machine does not. If you wanted typed letters with a clean R, you needed another machine." Claude rose, outraged. "My lord, this is speculation." The judge raised a hand. "It is inference," he said slowly. "There is a difference." Claude sat down, stiff with annoyance. I kept my voice calm. "Mr. Henshaw," I said, "you have given one explanation for the money, a loan. Do you have any explanation for the letters?" Derek's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "that was not me." "You did not type them," I said. "No," he repeated. "Then how do you explain the complainant's notes?" I asked, "turning up in your deposits?" He leaned back, adopting a look of injured youth. "I cannot," he said. "Maybe the police are wrong." "On that?" I said. "We agree." I sat down. Henry exhaled softly behind me, as though he had been under water. Doris looked at me from the dock, her expression uncertain, but a little less frightened. Claude rose for re-examination. He tried to restore Derek's confidence with gentle questions. Derek insisted again that Doris lent him money. He insisted again that he did not type letters. The more he insisted, the less convincing he became. When Claude finished, the judge looked over his spectacles. "Mr. Henshaw," he said, "you may step down." Derek left the witness box with a stiff smile that had lost its shine. As the jury filed out for a short break, Henry leaned close. "Mr. Rumpole," he whispered, "will that be enough?" "It will not be enough," I replied, "but it will be the beginning. A jury does not like being asked to swallow nonsense. It prefers to chew." I stood in the corridor and watched Claude speak to Inspector Sneed in hurried tones. Sneed's face was thunderous. Claude's was pale. The Crown does not enjoy a witness who will not behave. I returned to court and glanced at Doris. She looked smaller than ever. I gave her a brief nod. "Not encouragement. One must not promise, but recognition. In court, that can be more powerful than comfort. Tomorrow would be my turn to speak to the jury in the language it understands. Not typefaces and certainty, not pomp and procedure, but common sense. And common sense, in my experience, is the one witness the Crown can never cross-examine. Chapter 9. The Golden Thread and the Stuttering R. It is one of the more tiresome habits of judges that, just when a case begins to show signs of life, they feel obliged to encourage it to die quietly. On the morning we resumed, his lordship beckoned me to the bench with the air of a man calling a dog. "Mr. Rumpole," he said, in a low voice that suggested private wisdom, "there is still time for your client to take a sensible course." "A sensible course, my lord," I replied, "usually involves somebody else being sensible first." His lordship's eyes narrowed. "You have raised matters," he said, "but the charge is serious. Juries are unpredictable." "So are typewriters," I said, and returned to my place. Henry, seated behind, leaned forward. "He wanted you to advise a plea, sir," Henry whispered. "It is always their favourite hymn," I murmured. "Spare the court, spare the time, spare the trouble, spare the truth." Claude Erskine Brown rose with the faint stiffness of a man whose collar has become too tight. "My lord," he said, "the Crown has no further witnesses." Of course he had no further witnesses. He had already produced the expert with certainty, the inspector with simplicity, and the witness with fear. There was nothing left that would not complicate his story. "My lord," I said, "I call Miss Doris Phipps." There was a small stir. Defendants do not often enter the witness box in the Old Bailey. They are afraid, or advised, or bullied into silence. But Doris had asked, in the cells, whether she would ever be allowed to speak. It had been said so quietly that I could not refuse her. Doris stepped into the witness box with careful dignity. She looked straight ahead, as if looking to the side might invite disaster. She took the oath in a voice that was thin, but steady. I began gently. "Miss Phipps," I said, "you are employed as a typist." "Yes," she said. "You have been employed at that insurance office for years," I said. "Yes," she replied. "Have you ever been in trouble?" I asked. "No," she said. "Have you ever blackmailed anyone?" I asked. "No," she said again, and the no sounded like someone trying to keep a door shut in a high wind. "Did you type the letters to Mr. Barry Tuck?" I asked. "No," she said. "And did you receive £2,000 from Mr. Tuck?" I asked. "No," she said. "Did you lend Mr. Derek Henshaw £2,000? I asked. She looked baffled. "No," she said. "I do not have £2,000. Claude rose. "My lord, the witness cannot know what she had. People keep money in all sorts of places." Doris turned her head slightly, and I saw the flash of plain annoyance that comes when a quiet person is finally pushed too far. "I keep my money in the bank," she said. "There is not much of it." The judge looked faintly amused, which is as close as he ever comes to sympathy. I handed Doris a copy of her typing samples. "Is this your work?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "And what do you notice?" I asked. "About the letter R?" She hesitated, then answered like a woman, stating the obvious about a kettle. "It sticks," she said. "Sometimes it hits twice." I nodded. "And you reported that fault?" I said. "Yes," she replied. "Did anyone repair it?" I asked. "No," she said. "They never do." I thanked her and sat down. Claude began his cross-examination with a delicacy that was meant to look fair, but sounded like a man picking at a stain. "Miss Phipps," he said, "you typed letters all day." "Yes," she replied. "You were tired," he suggested. "Yes," she said. "You may have typed a letter at night," he said. "No," she said. "You may have become angry," he said. She looked at him, puzzled. "Angry?" she said. "About what?" Claude pressed on. "You knew of Mr. Tuck," he said. "A television man. Perhaps you admired him." Doris blinked. "I do not watch the morning program," she said. The jury laughed softly. Claude's cheeks coloured. He abandoned admiration and tried another path. "You say the letter R sticks," Claude said. "But you could strike it firmly." "I always strike it firmly," Doris replied. "It still sticks." Claude's questions ran out. He sat down with the air of a man who has tried to move a stone and found it heavier than expected. I called Miss Gribble next. She confirmed the shared machine. She confirmed Doris's habit of arriving early and leaving on time. She confirmed the nephew's habit of swaggering in after lunch and typing whatever he pleased. Then I called Mr. Biddle again, and he produced the maintenance log like a holy relic. The sticking R was there in ink. The separate machine in the managing director's office was there too, with its regular servicing. Finally, at my request, the court allowed a small demonstration, not with a whole typewriter, thank heaven, but with typed sheets produced under supervision, one on the typing pool machine, one on the managing director's machine, and one being the blackmail letter itself. The court clerk handed the pages to the judge, and then to the jury. 12 people leaned forward, peering at paper with the devotion usually reserved for football results. You could see it, even without spectacles. On the typing pool sheet, the R carried a faint shadow. On the managing director's sheet, it was clean. On the blackmail letter, it was clean. Every time, Claude objected, of course. He said it was theatrical. I agreed with him. It was theatrical. The Old Bailey is built for theatre. But it was also true. When my evidence ended, the judge looked relieved, as though the trial had been an unpleasant interruption to his paperwork. "Very well," he said. "Closing speeches?" Claude went first. He spoke of threats and fear. He spoke of the seriousness of blackmail. He spoke, in that smooth voice, of how typists have access to machines, and machines do not lie. He tried to treat the serial numbers as a coincidence. He suggested the young man's deposits proved only that he had received money, not how. He did not mention the clean R again. He avoided it as a man avoids a puddle. Then it was my turn. I rose and faced the jury, and for once I did not begin with a joke. Jokes are useful, but they must not get in the way of common sense. "Members of the jury," I said, "you have heard a great deal about typing. You have heard about experts and characteristics. You have heard about the neatness of a machine. But I ask you to remember one thing. Machines do not commit crimes. People do." I walked a little, slowly, keeping my voice steady. "The Crown say my client is guilty because she is a typist, because she had access. That is not proof. That is a guess, dressed up as evidence." I pointed gently to the documents. "You have seen the typing from the office machine. You have seen the letter R stutter. You have seen it in Miss Phipps's work and in the samples produced under supervision. You have also seen the blackmail letter. Its R does not stutter. It is clean. It is certain. It is, if you like, well-behaved." A juror nodded slightly. I saw it, and held on. "So, if the blackmail letter did not come from the stuttering machine, where did it come from?" The Crown have offered you no answer, but you have heard that there was another typewriter, a maintained one, a private one, a machine that could type clean letters all day long. I paused. Now we come to the money. The complainant withdrew £2,000. The bank recorded the serial numbers. Those numbers reappear, like a signature, in cash deposits made by Mr. Derek Henshaw, at a pawnbroker, at a motorbike shop. Men who record numbers because their living depends on mistrust. I let that settle. The Crown ask you to believe that Miss Phipps lent Mr. Henshaw money. Not £5, not 50, 2,000. A woman who takes the bus. A woman who told you, plainly, she does not have such money. And the Crown ask you to believe she somehow obtained it from a man she has never met, who paid to keep his secrets. I spread my hands. Members of the jury, there is a phrase often used about criminal justice, the golden thread. It runs through every case. The burden is on the Crown to prove guilt, not on the defendant to prove innocence. If you are sure, you convict. If you are not sure, you acquit. I looked at Doris in the dock, then back to the jury. In this case, you have not only doubt, you have contradictions. A stuttering R and a clean letter, recorded numbers and a convenient story, a young man with expensive tastes and a desperate need for cash. I lowered my voice. Do not convict a woman because it is tidy. Do not convict her because she is the easiest person to blame. Convict only if you are sure. And if you are sure, ask yourselves this. Why would a typist choose, as her instrument of blackmail, a machine that stutters in the one letter that appears in her own name? I sat down. The judge gave his summing up, brisk and dry. He reminded the jury of the law. He reminded them that menaces and demands are serious. He reminded them, though less warmly, of the need for proof. Then the jury retired. In the silence that followed, Henry leaned close. "You did well, sir," he whispered, as if praise might be heard by the judge and punished. "We shall see," I replied. "A jury is like the weather. You can talk about it, but you cannot control it." Doris looked at me once, and I nodded. Not because I was certain, but because she deserved, at least, that small courtesy. As we waited, I found myself thinking, absurdly, of the Residents' Association letter on the breakfast table. Menaces and demands, typed with confidence, by people who believe words are power. In court, words are power only when backed by proof. And somewhere, behind a stuttering key and a clean letter, the truth waited for its verdict. Chapter 10. Acquittal with a modest glass. The jury in the Old Bailey can be away for 5 minutes or 5 hours. Both feel the same, which is to say, like a lifetime spent watching a clock that refuses to move. We waited in the usual way. Doris sat in the dock, with her hands folded, as if she were holding herself together by sheer force of habit. Henry hovered behind me like a nervous umbrella. Claude Erskine Brown sat with his arms crossed, his expression politely blank, as though he were already composing a speech for the dining club about the decline of standards. Inspector Sneed stood by the door, rigid and offended by the very idea of uncertainty. At last the usher appeared with that small, dramatic nod, which means the jury have decided that somebody's fate is no longer a matter for thought. "Jury," the clerk called. They filed in 12 faces, arranged in the particular English combination of seriousness and relief, the relief being mostly that they were not the ones in the dock. The foreman stood. He cleared his throat, as if preparing to read out a grocery list. "On the charge of blackmail," he said, "we find the defendant not guilty." For a moment there was no sound at all. Then Doris made a small noise, not a sob, not a laugh, but a breath that seemed to have been trapped in her chest since the day Inspector Sneed first decided typing was a criminal skill. I felt my own shoulders loosen, as though I had been holding up the dome of St. Paul's. The judge looked down at Doris, then at me, then at the jury. He had the faintly irritated expression of a man whose time has been wasted by facts. "Miss Phipps," he said, "you are discharged." That was all. No apology, no compliment to the defense, no comment on the Crown's enthusiasm for tidy mistakes. Judges do not apologize. They merely proceed. Doris was led out. Henry and I followed, and for a brief moment, in the corridor, she stopped and turned to me. "Thank you," she said. It was a small sentence, but it carried the weight of her whole dreary office life, of cups of tea balanced on piles of forms, of bus journeys in the rain, of being the sort of person nobody notices until the police arrive. "You are welcome," I said, "and next time you see a typewriter, treat it with suspicion." She gave the faintest smile. Then she was gone, swallowed by the corridor. Claude appeared at my elbow, still wearing his look of wounded propriety. "Well," he said, "you got away with it." "I did not get away with anything, Claude," I replied. "My client did. That is the point." Claude sniffed. "The jury was sentimental," he said. "They liked the stuttering letter." "They liked evidence," I said. "It is a quaint habit." Inspector Sneed approached, face like weather. "This is not over," he said, as if acquittal were merely an administrative delay. "It is over," I replied. "For Miss Phipps? Certainly. For you, perhaps not. Your certainty may require counselling." Sneed glared, then turned away without another word. "He does not enjoy defeat. Policemen believe the world ought to behave like their notebooks." Henry looked at me, eyes bright with the rare pleasure of a case properly won. "Mr. Rumpole," he whispered. "What about Derek Henshaw?" "Ah," I said. "The nephew." Henry nodded. "Will he be charged?" he asked. "That," I said, "depends on whether the Crown enjoy eating their own evidence. They may decide it is easier to let him ride his motorbike into the sunset and call it bad luck." Henry looked troubled. "Henry likes the world to make moral sense." "Sometimes," I said, "the law is wonderfully precise. It finds the truth. It protects the innocent. And sometimes, Henry, it simply avoids embarrassment." Back at Chambers, Phillida was waiting. She looked up from her papers and gave me the briefest nod, the nod of a professional acknowledging another professional. "Well done," she said. "Justice," I replied, "occasionally stumbles into the right direction." Phillida allowed herself the faintest smile. "Try not to gloat," she said. "Claude will sulk for days." "He would sulk in paradise," I said. Henry was already talking about costs, about discharge papers, about returning exhibits. Henry is never happier than when the law becomes filing again. I, however, did what any rational man does after the Old Bailey. I went to Pomeroy's wine bar. Pomeroy's was in its usual state of dim refuge. The barman nodded, as if welcoming a man back from war. I ordered claret, not a heroic quantity, a modest glass. Victory in the Old Bailey is never a reason for excess. Excess is what brings you there in the first place. I sat with my glass and considered the case. A typist, a frightened television man, a tidy police theory, a stuttering R, overlooked because it was inconvenient, serial numbers, dismissed because they made the story messy, and a young man with the sort of confidence which is usually inherited, not earned. Claude's case had been built on the assumption that the simplest explanation must be true, but the simplest explanation is often merely the easiest to write down. Henry arrived, breathless, as if he had been running from the court. "Mr. Rumpole," he said. Bonnie Bernard rang. "He says the managing director is furious. He says Derek has taken a leave of absence." "A leave of absence," I repeated. That is an elegant phrase. It means the office has realized the truth and is trying to mislay it. Henry sat down, looking unhappy. It is not fair, he said. No, I agreed. Fairness is not a British institution. It is a foreign import. Henry frowned at me, then relaxed slightly. You will come home now, sir, he said, as if he were my wife. I will, I said, if she who must be obeyed has not already issued a warrant. On the walk home, London felt almost tender. The wet pavement reflected the street lamps. People hurried past, carrying bags and secrets. Buses sighed at stops. Somewhere a man swore at a taxi. The city continued, indifferent to verdicts. At Froxbury Mansions, Hilda met me at the door. You are late, she said. I have been saving the innocent, I replied. You have been drinking claret, she said. A modest glass, I answered. Hilda stepped aside to let me in, which in our marriage counts as mercy. The Residents' Association letter, she said, came again. Mr. Gubbins wants your signature. On menaces and demands, I said. How fitting. Hilda fixed me with her look. You will sign, she said. Of course, I replied. A barrister cannot refuse a document. I sat at the table, took up the pen, and signed my name beneath the typed firmness of Mr. Gubbins's prose. As I did, I found myself thinking of Miss Doris Phipps, perhaps at last on her bus, perhaps holding her handbag a little less tightly. I thought of the old typewriter, stuttering in its corner, blamed for a crime it had not committed, and I murmured, under my breath, as one does when the day has been long and the law has been both cruel and kind. We murder to dissect. Hilda looked up. What did you say? She demanded. Nothing, I replied. Only that the rubbish bins must be handled with care. Hilda nodded, satisfied. She returned to her plans for the charity supper, the residence rota, and Nick's moral improvement. The world resumed its proper order, and I, Horace Rumpole, sat in my chair at Froxbury Mansions, a free man for the moment, knowing that tomorrow London would produce another underdog, another tidy accusation, and another chance for the Old Bailey to say something worth hearing. With luck, and with a little claret, I would be there to listen. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for keeping me company in the corridors of the Old Bailey. If you have enjoyed this small triumph of the stuttering letter over the confident assumption, then do take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Old Bailey Stories, but only if you like what I am doing here. If you do not, you may, of course, continue to disapprove in silence, which is an art practiced to perfection in Froxbury Mansions. And do tell us in the comments where you are and what time it is as you listen. The law has a habit of believing it is the centre of the universe, and it does it good to be reminded that the rest of the world goes on, more or less happily, without wigs. If you have ever been blamed because you were the nearest person to the problem, or because someone decided you were an easy case, you will understand why I remain devoted to that unfashionable notion, proof. The golden thread is not decorative. It is what keeps ordinary people from being stitched into the wrong story. Now, if you will excuse me, I must face She Who Must Be Obeyed, the Residents' Association, and a typed notice about bicycles in the hallway. One may win an acquittal at the Central Criminal Court and still be convicted at home for failing to sign a committee letter. So, switch off the light, pour a modest glass of Chateau Thames Embankment, and remember, the law is wonderfully precise, provided someone bothers to look at the keys. Until next time, from the Old Bailey, good night.